There's a million different things you can do to party on a night out, and today we're ranking them from the most unhealthy to the healthiest in terms of your brain, your body, your recovery, and everything in between. Before we get started, it is important to note that I am not a medical professional, nor is anything on this page to be misconstrued with medical advice. Any legal substance we're going to talk about on this page should not be done unless it is specifically done under the direct supervision of a medical professional, and any of the illegal substances are absolutely discouraged in all forms and facets. And without any further ado, let's get into the video. If you know me, you know I spend a lot of time partying in my day. It's part of the reason I understand the human body as well as I do, because for years, I had to make sure that all the damage I was doing, I was counteracting somehow in order to have the mental and physical performance that I was looking. So in today's video, we're gonna go from 10 to 1, the worst all the way to the best. When I say best, I mean the least damage on the body and the mind and everything you could look for in functional medicine. And we're gonna go over what are the healthiest and most unhealthy ways to enjoy your weekend. I'm gonna go ahead and assume that we're not having many heroin and meth users on this page, so we're gonna exclude a lot of the ultra toxic and talk about what most of the mainstream drugs are out there. But if for whatever reason we find there's a big demand of you guys on this channel, we can go ahead and make a different video. Although I have a hard time believing there's a lot of biohacking heroin users out there, but I've been surprised before. Starting with number 10 on the list, the most unhealthy compound that gets used at scale, cocaine. You know, as you get older, it's surprising how many people you find out are using cocaine recreationally and professionally. People using it at work as well as in the bathroom stall at the bar. Cocaine provides a huge dose of dopamine that is short-lived, but provides users with an extreme boost of confidence, courage, and almost this knack to want to just take over the world and everything around. It's a triple reuptake inhibitor, which means it affects the dopamine, serotonin, and hopefully I'm saying this right, norepinephrine, as well as it's a sodium channel blocker. The effects it has on the body for users are massive metabolic debt. This is the exact opposite of regenerative medicine. In fact, it is degrading to the human body and everything it touches. Typical problems with cocaine users typically happen in the heart tissue. It's incredibly vasoconstricting, which typically we want to look for vasodilation, the expansion. It disrupts the heart's electrosignaling, causing it to beat faster, as well as simultaneously constricting the arteries. Cocaine is highly catabolic and threatens organ and brain health to the highest degree, and it is our last place loser. And also, with most cocaine users, the only thing you want to do after doing cocaine is more cocaine. I don't know, never really appealed to me. Number 9 on our list is prescription stimulants, so your Adderalls, your Vyvanse, typically used as either a study drug or in place of cocaine. This is a dual reuptake inhibitor affecting your dopamine and norepinephrine. This keeps you in a perpetual fight or flight state. Much like cocaine, it is drastic when it comes to muscle wasting. Vasoconstriction, yet again, makes it difficult for the blood pathways to supply nutrients to the muscles. The blood vessels tighten, reducing the amount of oxygen that gets through, and typically leads to adrenal burnout along with frying your dopamine receptor. Using these once or twice a year, for college to study for an exam, fine. But using consistently in any form or facet is absolutely terrible. And I think it's one of the biggest problems that the medical industry pushed on us as kids, is that we should have some sort of prescription ADHD medication, which I think is absolutely evil and criminal. Number 8 on our list is GHB, which is basically like liquid ecstasy. Users report an intense euphoria and intense uptick in libido, very similar to ecstasy and MDMA. That, alongside with extreme social confidence, a lot of people report it's like all the best parts of drinking alcohol without any of the bloat and the nausea. The mechanism of action is on the GABA B and GH receptors. In the short term, it actually can spike GH, which could give you a bit of a muscle benefit. But the risk, and the reason it is ranked so low on our list, is the tiniest bit of overdosing can be fatal to the users. Overdose would mean the immediate respiratory failure with little to no hope for survival. Number 7 on our list is MDMA, commonly referred to as Molly. MDMA produces what I would call radical empathy and an extreme euphoria. Everything feels very vibrant. Everything feels very alive and in tune. Specifically, users report a deep connection with others, making the experience a communal one. It is an sDRNA, which means it is going to dump your entire stores of serotonin, dopamine, and any emotional function you have in your brain. It's going to take a 2-week supply of it and use it all within about 4 to 6 hours, which can be fun while you're on it, but that's when people run into issues the next day. In the short term, users experience an extreme serotonin depletion, as well as a depression or an overall gloomy outlook on life after use. The long-term damage of a product like this is a systemic serotonin dip. So not only are you using up 2 weeks worth of serotonin, but now when you're trying to build it back, you can't even collect the same amount. You get a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less. All of a sudden, you can't be happy without it. In terms of its effects to the body, it is a huge stimulant of cortisol, which is extremely catastrophic to any sort of muscle development or fat loss. So MDMA, although can be fun for a few hours, very catabolic, very dangerous to the mind, very dangerous to the body. Number 6 on our list is alcohol, specifically wine and craft beer. Now, a lot of you are probably expecting alcohol to rank a little higher on the safety side because it's legal, when in fact, you're gonna be surprised to see what ranks above it. But when it comes to alcohol, it is a grade A poison. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is one of the most detrimental substances that can enter the human body in terms of your brain health, your body health, and everything in between, especially with how easily accessible it is in mass quantities. Alcohol users typically feel a looser experience, an extreme vote of confidence, and a lack of seriousness or care for things that otherwise would have mattered to them a lot in their sober state. Most beer and wine is made up of ethanol and phytoestrogens, which are the hops, as well as acetobacter, which is the sugar and yeast typically used in wine and beer. The main difference between these alcohols and some of the other ones we're going to talk about is they are packed with extra estrogens, which is especially damaging to any of its male consumers. In the short term, it'll also pretty drastically change your hormones in terms of your testosterone to estrogen balance, among with other reported issues, mostly mental when it comes to erectile dysfunction and others. Over the long term, which most alcohol drinkers are, it promotes a lot of visceral fat, which is why we typically see people with what we call beer belly. And the most dangerous piece of all is the toxicity it provides to the gut lining, which is why an overwhelming amount of Americans don't realize it, but they actually have what is called leaky gut syndrome, where they're unable to process the nutrients from their food because they've destroyed their gut lining to such a degree. Alcohol can be okay in small doses, unlike some of these other compounds, but the reason it ranks as low as it does is it's so easily overconsumed, and anything above anywhere from 1 to 2 drinks a week is typically an overconsumption. Which, let's be realistic, none of us are going out to the bar and getting 1 or 2 drinks. That might be a lie we tell ourselves to go out and have a little bit of fun. That always turns into 10. Number 5 on the list is clear spirits. So your tequilas, your vodkas. And the reason these are ranked a little bit higher on the list than the other is because of their chemical makeup. It does actually have a chemical difference in terms of the way it affects your body. The biggest difference is these alcohols affect your GABA receptors and produce what is called acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde, although not as terrible as phytoestrogens, do not be confused. It is still an absolute tier 1 poison to the body and should not be consumed in excess under any circumstances, whether that is for recreation or for any sort of ceremonial ritual. There's a lot of things Americans overdo alcohol for. And if you want to get into the nitty gritty of that, the reason I think the government allows things like alcohol, which I view as a lot more dangerous than most of the other compounds that exist, is it does not promote free thinking in any sense. In fact, it actually makes you okay with a suboptimal life because the pain mentally can be numbed temporarily, which is why, especially in older Hollywood movies, they would show people drinking on a routine basis, that if your life was terrible, then the only answer was, oh, if you have a drink or 2 every night, then it sort of numbs the pain and rocks you off to sleep. If your brain is so numb from the alcohol that you can't really process how bad your life is or have any real ambition to do anything more because you're always slightly hungover, alcohol can prove to be pretty effective for a government who needs workers. Number 4 on our list is cannabis, otherwise known as marijuana, weed, pot, whatever you want to call it. This is something a lot of people start with when they're in their high school years. It's usually people's first or second entry to the party world. Users pretty typically experience an immense relaxation as well as an overall euphoria where things are just funny. You know, they often talk about how you get the giggles and everything just seems to be funnier than it is, as well as extreme appetite increase, which can have some minor positive effects when it comes to your physique, especially in a bulking phase. Now, for someone who's in a cutting phase, that could certainly test your willpower. Marijuana affects your CB1 and your CB2 receptors. This will stimulate things like ghrelin, which is going to increase your appetite, and leptin, which is going to increase your satiety. Marijuana isn't toxic by nature. The real harm in terms of an internal organ perspective would just be the overconsumption of insulin spiking foods, which become incredibly appetizing while using. Long-term effects in users can actually notice a pretty high upkick in estrogen as well as a halt in their growth hormone production. This is particularly interesting because everyone has this image in their head of the pothead kid that's a little whiny and kind of a bitch about things. That could very well be because of an estrogen uptick. Now, I don't have any research that backs that up, but if we know that marijuana use does kick up your estrogen, and we see a lot of frequent users who develop this whiny mentality, this emotional mentality, they could very well be correlated. For someone on a night out, this personally would not be what I would look for in terms of what my Saturday night might look like, but there are people out here who enjoy this type of vibe, so this can be a safer alternative to things like alcohol. Number 3 on our list is MDMA, otherwise known as ketamine. Ketamine is a dissociative. It disconnects the user from any physical, mental, emotional, stress-related pain, which is why it's growing ever popular, especially for PTSD patients in a medical sense. But in recreational users, people are using it as a 30 to 45 minute dreamlike state that you can hop in and out of. And the reason people like it and it's growing in popularity is it doesn't last very long and doesn't have any sort of physical hangover effect like most of the other compounds do. There's not as much of a afterwards sacrifice that you have to deal with. It's fairly brain healthy and actually might be brain positive via synaptogenesis. It gives the brain an ability to expand neuroplasticity. And this is where we talk about some of these compounds might only not just be non-toxic, they could actually provide clinical benefit to the mind. Now, this doesn't mean doing the recreational street version of these drugs, like the powders or the snortables or anything like that, but doing it in a clinically advised medical setting could provide users with some pretty positive experience. In fact, there's a lot of research that shows that it might. In terms of its regenerative status, it is neuro-restorative, so it can actually rebuild pathways in the brain. The reason people use it from a PTSD standpoint is you can take a memory that would have otherwise been an unpleasant one and remove the associated pain with that. So for example, someone who had a bad experience at a carnival as a kid and now can't look at clowns. But you can use ketamine therapy and remove the negative association with clowns and be able to look at a clown again and go to a carnival again without associating the two with the negative experience that you had. Now, with this drug, the metabolic tax is definitely paid in the renal system. Especially in long-term users, the risk is bladder cytosis. The metabolites can be very damaging to the bladder lining, as well as people see some kidney issues when it comes to long-term use, but we're finding out more and more about this compound every single day. Number 2, ironically enough, is an ever-growingly popular compound, 2CB, otherwise known as Tuci. Users report a sparkle about their life, almost like a dreamlike state similar to the ketamine, but different in the sense where it's incredibly more euphoric, as well as it offers a very high sensory where sound sounds sweeter, colors look brighter, everything has a vibrance to it. This is a 5-HT2A and 5-HT2C agonist. The reason this one is so high up on our list is it picks at the stress hormone very similar to MDMA, without any of the massive serotonin dump. There's a slight increase in heart rate, but it doesn't last long, so it does not cross the border into any catabolism, so there's no muscle degradation, as well as there's no metabolic shutdown, so you're completely able to burn fat. Unlike MDMA, it doesn't have a massive serotonin or dopamine dump, so there is a mild come down period, but it is nothing close to that of a typical MDMA. It has a very low body toxicity. Although it is processed by the liver, it has not shown any of the same bladder or kidney damage that things like ketamine have shown. This is growing in health communities of all places because a lot of people are viewing this drug as a guilt-free way to party and have a much more elevated experience with something like this as opposed to alcohol without any of the negative physical and mental ramifications that come with long-term use of alcohol or any of the other substances. More and more continues to come out about this. I was actually under the accord that it was more harmful than it was, but after doing all the research for this video, I've come to find out it's not as harmful as I say it was. That doesn't mean anybody should go start doing this and expect to have no problems, but it does appear to show signs for opportunity. And number 1 on the list, the most beneficial way to have a good time on Saturday night is psilocybin, otherwise known as mushrooms. Mushrooms are very interesting from a mental aspect. This creates a profound consciousness where users experience, where you're able to think about the world and everything around it from a perspective of true authority as opposed to how they affect you. Users experience very heightened sensory of perception, as well as reports of emotional and mental breakthroughs, almost having a kumbaya moment as though they figured out the secrets of the universe. This is a pure 5-HT2A receptor agonist, which mimics things like serotonin. It has virtually zero dump, so your neurotransmitters not only remain intact, but they can actually strengthen in this process because of the compound's ability to increase neuroplasticity. It plugs into the receptors, and because it doesn't trigger any of the adrenal glands, there is absolutely zero muscle wasting and zero metabolic effect. So muscle protein synthesis and the fat burning pathways remain completely intact, not better, not worse. In terms of the way it affects the body, you can consider it a free ride. The only caveat would be when it comes to the brain. Now, there are several ways you can do this to, like I said, benefit the brain, but without any of those precautions and protocols, you would be effectively damaging. Long-term users have seen typically only positives when it comes to synaptogenesis, which is the expansion of the neural pathways. Now, I do want to reiterate again, there's nothing on this list that I condone doing, but if you are going to go out and have a good time on Saturday night, there are much healthier ways to do it than the ways we're doing it right now. The real purpose of this video is to bring those to light. Now, if you find this at all interesting and you want to learn about how to maximize the benefit you can get from using these type of products, there's another video I made. I'm going to link that one right here, where I walk you through the entire A to Z process on how to get the most of your nights out. And if you are going to do any of the ones that are a little bit less safe and a little more damaging, there's full protocols on how to limit that damage as much as possible. If you found this at all interesting, give us a like, give us a subscribe, put in the comments what you might want to see next, and we'll see you on the next one.